So with the cost of living crisis, everyone is tightening their belts and looking for ways to save money and cut costs. So for the motorist, this is no different. We've seen exorbitant rises in the prices of fuel at the fuel pumps, and every penny that we spend is getting us less far in terms of the miles that we cover. So in this video, we're going to look at 5 ways that a motorist can save money on their motoring costs. And some of the costs of actually owning a car are a complete mystery to a lot of drivers who've never given this subject any thought whatsoever. So how do you cut the costs of your motoring and your motoring expenses? We're going to look at 5 areas that will help you to save money in running a car. So the first obvious area is to change your driving style. We've got videos on hypermiling and cutting your fuel use and fuel consumption. But generally speaking, it's all about anticipation, not over revving the engine, using light throttle inputs, avoiding using the brake wherever possible by anticipating that you slow up, and generally regulating your driving style so that you're in the correct gear for whatever the engine is needing to do at a given time. So for most motorists who are indisciplined with bad habits, you can save about 20% on your fuel just by employing revised driving methodology and improving your driving style so that you're driving with economy in mind. So for drivers that do quite a few miles, that can add up to quite a saving over the year. So how does mileage cost add up? Well, just running a few figures through the MPG calculator that we've got on our site, it proves quite interesting. So we're assuming an average of 12,000 miles per year. So the first car I've got was rather uneconomical. It only managed 33 miles to the gallon. So assuming that I'm paying about 180 per litre, which seems to be about a benchmark at the moment, hopefully it's going to come down, but you never know, it could shoot up even more. But assuming the 180 per litre is what I've paid, the total year for the 12,000 miles will have cost me £2,946. If I got 45 miles to the gallon, my cost over the year for those 12,000 miles will be lower, coming in at 2,160. So another area where people are running up massive bills in running their cars is just skimping on servicing and maintenance. So avoiding those oil changes and tyre changes and just looking after the car, it's a false economy. You may save yourself a few hundred each year when it comes to servicing, but you are storing up a massive problem for the future, because cars do need fresh oil. They do need to be serviced and maintained so they're always running at peak efficiency. So just cutting corners on maintenance costs is a false economy. It's also putting you at risk. At the very least, you might end up with a breakdown that you could have avoided, but at the very worst, it could cost you your life if a major component in the car failed or the car suddenly died on a very high speed road, leaving you in a very vulnerable position. So don't ever cut or skimp on the servicing costs. If your service schedule comes up on your dashboard or your service book indicates that a service needs to be carried out, make sure it is carried out. And another cost that can be avoided by most motorists is doing the servicing yourself. Taking your car to a franchise dealer, it gets you the stamp in the service book. It's nice when you come to sell the car, but you are paying hundreds more than you could if you just service the car yourself. And for me, for people like me who know what they're doing and know which parts, you can use better quality parts in that service that will enhance the performance of the car and ensure its longevity. You can specify higher quality oils and your servicing costs will generally still come in far below what you would get at a main franchise dealer. So when it comes to selling a car that you've serviced yourself, it would help if you kept receipts of all the parts that you'd purchased and logged carefully when it was serviced and what you did, because that will help to increase the resale value of your car. Now, you can't always do that. If you've bought a car that's new and it's got some kind of warranty on it, the warranty may specify that the car needs to be seen by a franchise dealer or a registered garage in order for that warranty to be upheld. So don't sacrifice your warranty just for the sake of saving a few hundred. But certainly as that warranty expires, there is no reason to keep going to a franchise dealer, giving them your money to do very, very simple tasks. And if you visit our site, TorqueCars.com, you'll find lots of articles articles that help you to understand the maintenance of a car, how to carry out a basic service, and some of the components that you actually need to pay attention to. Another cost that can be avoided by most motorists is choosing the right car. We've seen massive differences in running costs on cars. Some of the performance cars can cost 7,000 to 8,000 a year in servicing and running costs, whereas your average family car may be 500, 600, and there's a massive difference there. So do you need a high performance car? Do you need a car that uses really expensive spark plugs, requires premium fuel all the time? And looking at different brands of cars, you'll often find there are differences in the costs of running them. So going back to my experience with Audi, they share parts with the Volkswagen group. So generally parts are much cheaper than they would be for, say, a BMW or a Mercedes. Now, I know the BMW and Mercedes drivers would argue their parts are really good quality and they don't break down and much more reliable. But when it comes to routine things like brake discs, brake pads and other ancillaries, you would generally get better value for money within something like the Volkswagen Audi group, where they reuse a lot of parts on a lot of different cars. But that's not to say you shouldn't look at other manufacturers of these parts. So there are certainly some deals out there. If you had a BMW or Mercedes, you may well not be buying the Mercedes or the BMW parts. There's lots of other performance makers out there that offer parts of better quality than you would get from the original factory. So think carefully about the car you buy and look at the servicing costs. Look at the servicing schedule. Look at the cost of tyres. Are you doing a high mileage? Is the tyre consumption going to factor in, or is that going to be insignificant? When I was doing about 3,000 miles a year, it really didn't bother me how much it cost in tyres and servicing and fuel costs. But my circumstances changed and I shot up to about 20,000 miles a year, and I found the costs prohibitive. They were becoming really expensive. I was needing to get the clutch done and the tyres needed to be changed every sort of 8 or 9 months. So those costs were really racking up. So that's why I converted to a much smaller car that's got much lower running costs. So before we look at the biggest hidden cost in motoring, I've got a small favour to ask. Please drop us a like, because it really helps us to get out there. We're a very small channel. Really appreciate all of the comments and all the feedback and all the suggestions that people make. It really helps me to shape the video content and even the content on our website, just to make sure that I'm covering topics that interest you and answering the questions that you want. So the final area to talk about in avoiding unnecessary motoring costs, the biggest cost in owning a car. For most people, it is actually depreciation. If you go into a showroom and you buy a car that's brand new, within just a few years, you've lost 50% of your money. So that far outweighs any cost you would have put in the fuel tank and in running the car over the years. So how can you avoid depreciation? Well, doing your research carefully when you buy a car, you can avoid buying those overpriced models that people just don't love and they depreciate like a stone. So choosing popular cars, choosing a reasonable spec of engine, and also avoiding buying new. I'll never buy a new car myself because of the depreciation. You can generally get a really good car that's got a low mileage that's 2 or 3 years old, and that will already have lost 30, 40, 50% of its new market value. So the first owner has generally stumped up the biggest cost in depreciation. So it's more cost effective to buy an older car with a lower mileage that's been well looked after than it is to buy the newest car you can. And also different brands of car depreciate at different rates. I'm a bit of an Audi guy myself, so I found that Audis tend to depreciate much more slowly than, say, Seat or Skoda in the same Volkswagen Audi group. They share very, very similar components, but the depreciation curve is much lower on Audi. So if you buy an Audi, it's generally worth a lot more after 2 or 3 years than the same outlay on one of the other brands within the Volkswagen Audi group. So just picking out a few numbers just to show how much depreciation will actually cost you. We're taking the example of an A3, a 2-litre TDI. If you were to buy one brand new, you'd need to stump up about 52,990. So I've just looked on car sales websites, and that was a price that came up at the top for a brand new Audi A3 TDI. So up with our good old depreciation graph, you buy the car new at 52,990. If you sell it 3 years later, you'll get back about 23,990, At 5 years old, it'll be worth about 16,400, and at 7 years old, it's worth 11,495. So the massive step of depreciation between new and 3 years old would mean you lose 29,000. Buying a 2019 car and keeping it for 4 years, you would lose about £12,490, which is 3.1k per year. If you had that same 2019 car and only kept it 2 years, you would lose about 7,590, so you'd lose 3.7k. So buying an older car and keeping it longer will actually minimise the amount of depreciation you suffer from your car. So depreciation makes a significant contribution to your annual running costs of your car, but is it worth changing your car for one that's more economical? Well, let's just have a look at some of the fuel economy figures, and as we do that, bear in mind the amounts that you would lose if you'd sold the car. So how does mileage cost add up? But assuming the 180 per litre is what I've paid, the total year for the 12,000 miles will have cost me £2,946. If I got a more economical car and it was returning about 45 miles to the gallon, my cost over the year for those 12,000 miles will be lower, coming in at 2,160. So not a massive saving, and you can see already that depreciation is by far and away the biggest contributor to the cost of owning a car. So if you can beat that depreciation, you've made significant savings. We've got to bear in mind as well that buying an older car will often bring with it a few problems that need to be sorted. A new car is relatively reliable and just needs its regular service intervals, but some older cars may need additional work, like new suspension fitting, and the whole brake assembly may need replacing, for example. They're the sort of things that wear with age. So even if we factored in the extra cost of running an old car, if you bought a 10-year-old 1.9 Golf GTI, you would hardly notice the depreciation if you sold that a few years later. So be very careful when you specify your car. Look at the depreciation involved. Just changing the engine or the spec of the car, or avoiding the estate or sedan versions if the hatchbacks and the smaller versions are more popular in the area that you live. They can all have a big factor, and they all play a major part in avoiding the depreciation on your car. So the only way you can really guarantee that you won't be affected by depreciation is to buy a car that is appreciating in value. So we would refer to these as future classics, but the big catch with these is the running costs are often prohibitively expensive. You take something like a Porsche 911 Turbo, which increases phenomenally over the years as you own it, but the running costs of those put them out of the bracket of most ordinary motorists. So buying a simple 10-year-old car and keeping it for 3 or 4 years does make really good economic sense. In fact, a lot of my friends are buying cars that are 10, 15 years old and just running them into the ground. So as soon as the repair bills start to mount up, they ditch that car and get another one. And that way they can enjoy pretty much depreciation-free motoring. So think about all the money that goes into running a car, not just the fuel that you put into the tank each week. Look at the depreciation. Choose your car wisely. Often a bargain is not the bargain that it seems when you've had to live with it for a year or two and you've started to have to spend serious money on parts, replacement costs and fixing issues. So thanks for watching. Hope that's been informative to you. Stay tuned. We've got lots of other money saving videos and articles coming up on this channel and on our website. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. We'd love you to keep in touch with us. Let us know in the comments if you've got any tips on saving money for motorists, and maybe even we'll generate a video that's based around your idea and your suggestion. And please give us a like, because that really helps us to get out there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.